has never been a single remake I have been more pessimistic about than the remake of Silent Hill 2. I mean, ever since this thing was first announced, I had nothing but concern that one of my favorite games, one of my favorite stories ever told, was going to be historically replaced by something that just didn't really understand why it worked, or didn't really truly get the same thing across. There were many reasons for this concern. I mean, firstly, Konami has had a terrible track record for throwing their IPs around recklessly for a cheap buck. Quality clearly has not mattered to this company for a very long time. It really peaked with the whole Kojima thing after Metal Gear Solid 5. Like, they felt devilishly corporate. I still feel the cancellation of PT's Silent Hills rippling through time to this very day. There was a very long, quiet stretch for the series. Gate-kept by rabid corporate hellhounds, I began to accept that this beautiful series, well, it was done. It was over, and I just felt thankful. I just felt very lucky, as it was, that we got 4 sweet-ass games that all offered something different. Hey, that was enough for me. And then, out of nowhere, Konami starts announcing so much Silent Hill stuff all at once. It's like as if they've really wanted to milk the property as hard as possible suddenly. New movie, new game, new remake, a new weird live stream game thing? What is Silent Hill Ascension? This one really felt like a huge nail in the coffin for Silent Hill. The quality of the writing was so bad, it felt like it was written by a crappy AI, and the way the creators responded to criticism left a really bad taste in everybody's mouth. It felt like history was repeating itself yet again. Has Konami remained unchanged, unreliable? It really seemed so. And the big kicker here, the full-on remake of the most beloved and arguably most important story they have ever published, was being handled by Bloober Team, a Polish studio that, while their games are pretty to look at, they're graphically impressive, they often drop the ball when handling psychological themes, something very integral to getting the story of Silent Hill 2 right. Now listen, I'm not trying to be some hater or anything. Like, I knew at the very least I could look forward to walking around a new, highly detailed version of Silent Hill, as long as I got that much right. Like, I'm sure I would enjoy this in some capacity. And it is also just pretty exciting to play a brand new version of a game you do enjoy a lot. It's really cool seeing all of the new decisions that were involved, all of the different interpretations of gameplay and stuff. But while I don't need this new interpretation to be all exactly the same, it does at least have to harness the same sorts of things that made the original what it was. It's gotta have a disturbing thematic story, rough survival horror combat, and resource management that makes you feel like you're barely getting by, the drab, rusty, and dilapidated atmosphere that sticks with you forever, and puzzles that are oh so perplexing and strange. Combat and resource management is the most important thing to me. I mean, that's the main reason I love these games, to feel like I am surviving through a horror setting. And, oh no, that combat trailer they showed later, man, I don't know, it looked less like the original's appeal and more like Homecoming. But regardless of this roller coaster of feelings I experienced leading up to this thing's release, here it is in my hands, it's out, I played it, I beat it, and I got a whole lot of thoughts and feelings about it. Well, I guess we'll start with the verdict, huh? Because I know a lot of people just want to know already, is it good, is it bad, is it somewhere in between? What did I think of it? Well, you know, I kind of really didn't expect to be saying this, but, it's kind of really good. Like, there's a lot about this thing that I really liked, a lot that I really loved. Some stuff I wasn't huge on, there is some criticisms, but overall, like, I'm shocked at how good a game this is. I would say it's comparable to the Resident Evil 4 remake, where it's really doing its own thing. Like, this and, this here, they are not even remotely the same video game. They may be the same story and have the same setting and a lot of the same maps, but these are two very different video games. And that's sort of what I was hoping for. You know, I really love a new version of something that's going for something totally different, but it still gets across the very same appeal of the original. It's just doing it in a totally different way. It's not perfect, however, so why don't we talk more about it? I'll do spoilers later on in the video because I know everybody wants to hear all of the changes to the story and what I think of them and stuff, but I guess I'll talk more about the visuals and gameplay and all that stuff, level design first, and then we'll get into that later. Title screen sure feels a lot different, a lot more modern. It sort of feels like a Last of Us title screen, but man, I really miss that simple, leathery, dirty feel to the original game's title screen. It was so iconic despite how simple it was. Here, I don't know, it's toilets. Like, why are we looking at toilets? There's so many beautiful environments from Silent Hill 2 you could have used for the title screen, and I get it's the first part of the game, it's the first room, sure. But nothing about this imagery, this angle, I don't think is really gonna stick with me in the same way as the original title screen. I know this is a big dumb nitpick, but it's the first thing I'm looking at, so it's the first thing I'm gonna say anything about. But on the flip side here, they kept the separate action and puzzle difficulty. You gotta love to see that. So the game starts the exact same way. We open with James looking at himself in the mirror, peering at his reflection. They kind of play it up a little bit, but I do like that you can see the imprint of where his wedding ring used to be. Rancid bathroom's a lot darker, you can't really make out as much. I guess they wanted this to feel like you start in the dark before you really come out into the bright white view of Lake Toluca. Walking out to the ledge, the grand view of the lake and forest, James contemplates the letter that brought him here.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill.
The opening overall is more or less exactly the same. James receives a letter from his dead wife Mary inviting him to their special place in Silent Hill, and James, acting on what's either hope or delusion, arrives to search for what he knows he won't find. They did a fairly good job capturing that big wide view. I love the way the trees go down the hill and disappear into the fog. You can barely see the hill. And I love this extra angle you get here now, just spending a couple of moments up close, more intimately with James, just leaning on the fence as the wind blows through the branches and his hair.
It's ridiculous. Couldn't possibly be true.
You could almost feel the cold breeze on his face as he just tries to process what's going on.
Mary died of that damn disease 3 years ago. So then why am I looking for her?
And thus we begin our long, winding journey down through the forest into the town. The sound design is absolutely intact, which, I expected. They have the same sound guy on, doing the music again, doing the sounds again. I guess we'll talk about the music. Let's get the music out of the way. Overall, it sounds pretty much the same. I think they are rearrangements of the original soundtrack, but widely, the music sounds pretty much the same as it did in the original. There are, new versions, new covers of, the guitar themes for the credits, and I honestly don't like any of them as much as the original, but overall I do like the music a lot, and the new music tracks, like this one right here. Really great additions. It feels perfectly in tune with the mood of Silent Hill 2. If you've played the original, you will notice some differences going into town. They make you walk into an auto shop to find a key. That's something that didn't happen in the original. It feels like a change made just to kind of help people understand the gameplay. It's like you can vault over stuff, you can break windows, you can do all of these different actions. So it makes sense to change the beginning a little bit to teach the player how to do all of that, because what you're doing isn't the same. But yeah, once you're in the town, once you're at Silent Hill, it is as familiar as ever. This really is the exact same map layout, at least for the first part of the town, and every building is still there. The Gigabyte computers, the Silent Hill Tavern, the Happy Burger, except there's way more detail. It feels like they really tried to make it feel like a real town. The tavern looks way more like a tavern. It no longer feels just like these very simple PS2 storefronts, and I really appreciate that they kept all of the same businesses, because that was something I loved about Silent Hill 2, seeing how many different stores they actually made instead of copying and pasting the same ones over and over. Though they even expanded a little bit of that, which I kind of didn't expect. There was a part of the game early on where my wife left to the kitchen to get us a snack, and I audibly gasped. I was like, oh! And she comes back in saying, what happened? Did something jump out? Did a scary enemy pop up? And I go, no. You could go inside the Happy Burger. Okay, so this is all I was really hoping from this, was just to be able to go in some of these buildings, seeing a little bit more of it. So already in the first half hour, it was already doing what I was hoping it would do. And seeing it all with a more controllable camera is pretty cool. It feels like you have a much more, it's a lot easier just to look at these buildings, because, the camera was wonky in the original, and that is something I do love about the original game. But it is just so much easier to look up at all of these buildings and really appreciate all the new detail. I was a little worried about how the fog would look because that is one of the most iconic looking things about the original. I'd say it's pretty good. It has that same just pure white, lifeless feel to it. So thick, you can't even really see very far in front of you. And the new camera does complement that quite a bit. Even the way you can look up at the sky now and you see it completely engulfed by the clouds. Now, the worst thing I can say about the presentation is not all the time, but sometimes this feels like a post-processing nightmare. This is the worst thing I can say about the visuals. I mean, it felt so weird to start this game, and immediately you're looking at reflections that are stuttery and pixely looking and fuzzy, and it's kind of really distracting sometimes. Now, obviously, it does look a lot better on the resolution mode, but I'm not going to play a game on resolution mode. I like how it feels at a smoother frame rate because it feels better to play. I care more about that than some visuals being a little smoother, right? Now, I've heard some people say they played on PC and they didn't have these problems whatsoever, but on the flip side, I've also talked to friends that played it on PC and they have good modern PCs, even with ray tracing cards and everything, and they also reported to me the exact same post-processing reflections issues. I really hope they fix this sort of thing with patches because it is really distracting, and it's kind of a shame because the environments are absolutely beautiful and fun to look at and completely absorb, and that much did take me out a little bit. But that's the worst I can say about the visuals. Everything else is utterly fantastic. Now, honestly, I wasn't really worried about the visuals. I felt like that was going to be the one thing that this game does get right, on top of Bloober's ability to make really nice looking games and the fact that they have the original artist who worked on the original game. I felt like the direction there would probably be good enough. It is a lot better than good enough, though. It really is an amazing looking thing. That sense of deliberate dilapidation, you know, there's trash everywhere, there's garbage, there's things crumbling apart, wallpaper peeling off the walls, yet it doesn't feel haphazardly placed around. They did a really good job of carefully putting it together in a way that drags your view across it, that's just interesting to look at, that kind of tells a story of who was doing things here before you came in and looked at it all abandoned and lifeless now. And with how the Silent Hill series has always been revered for its incredible lighting, especially for the time, pretty nice to see what really feels like some of the best horror lighting I think I've ever seen in a modern AAA game yet. Many of the old details are all still there, like the way you can find a teddy bear in the apartment, but there's a lot of new stuff too. Well, I don't know if this was really in the original, I'd have to really look closely again, but walking around town and seeing all of these flyers posted at polls, talking about a drug problem, and it's kind of interesting, like, yeah, that makes sense because of the whole Kaufman thing in Silent Hill 1, that would have been a presence in this town, and seeing Bloober acknowledge that with extra details kind of does help make the universe of Silent Hill feel a little bit more there, more consistent, though that seemed to be all I heard people talking about when this thing first released, or when people were playing it 2 days early, because if you pre-ordered it, you could play it 2 days earlier. I think you had to pay like the extra $10. I didn't do that, I just played it on release, like normal. But man, I was just seeing how it's full of Easter eggs for the fans. Like, I saw the whole Comic Sans version of the Silent Hill Ranch, you know, a reference to that stupid sign in the HD collection version, and you gotta like clip into a building to find it. I was just seeing stuff like that, like, oh, when you go in the motel, you can find the detective's hat, just like he was there in the Silent Hill 3. It's like, sure, those are cool details, but that was all I was seeing people talk about, so I still wasn't super confident that this game was going to be good based on just that. So if you're worried that's all it was going to be, don't worry. The attention to detail here really does feel like a labor of love. They took everything that was there in the original, the way the wallpaper looked, the way the crumbling buildings looked, and they just pushed it further. It really does feel like Silent Hill 2, it's just, yeah, way more detailed. And when I say pushed, I mean like amount of detail. I don't mean like pushing the emotion, pushing how loud the scene is. And that's something I was pretty worried about because Silent Hill 2 just had this subtle mood to it. It got things across without yelling it at you. I mean, even like that first trailer for the game, James's reflection in the face, it just felt like, oh, look at this emotion he's feeling, while the original felt more hollow and vacant of emotion. And this is a really good example showing that they definitely did listen to feedback, because his reflection in the final game much closer to what the original one was getting across. One thing that's neat is that there's no longer any loading screens. When you go through a door, James just pushes it open and you just walk through in one uninterrupted take. Now, I do think the loading screens, it did add a little bit to the tension. Like, you go into the door and you have these like 3 or 4 seconds of just the loading screen wondering, is there going to be something in there? Am I going to be safe? That feeling does get removed because of the lack of loading screens, but it does add to the feeling of just exploration and really being there. So it's a trade-off that makes it different, but not worse or better. It's just a cool, different thing. Now, the new camera, of course, that's going to have a lot of mixed reception from old-time fans, because the way the camera worked did complement the way the unwieldy gameplay kind of operated in the original, and it was something I really liked, having to worry about the camera as much as I was worrying about the placement of my character. And with modern games, it's kind of one thing instead of two separate things. The character and the view move together. You move the view to move the character now. And when you do it that way, two things get lost. More unique styles of gameplay get lost, and the ability to carefully bring the player's attention to certain things, especially item placement, stuff like that. Maybe there's an important thing you have to go up and interact with, and we don't need to make it glow or shine or have like a label on it. As long as we just carefully paint these camera angles well, the player will understand what they're looking at the moment they look at it. And that is something you do completely remove when you make the camera something you just control all the time. I remember Fatal Frame 2, the Wii version, had a new over-the-shoulder camera, and it really didn't do the game very much justice. It really felt like that thing was made without that camera in mind, and suddenly a lot of the scares were no longer as effective, and just exploring the areas didn't feel as interesting because you weren't getting all of these cool perspectives. It just felt like you're looking at the same sort of thing the whole time. You're looking at walls from the same angle. It just ends up with a lot less visual variety. Luckily, though, this being a lot more from the ground up and reimagined and with a lot more changes to it, it feels a lot more made with that sort of thing in mind than like that Fatal Frame 2 remake. Some scares are cleverly programmed to not occur until you're looking in the right way. One good example here is when you shine the flashlight over here, this thing escapes. Now, I saw this moment a couple of times because this was a hard part of the game and I died a few times, but each time I looked at that thing going away, I would do it with different timings. I kind of tested it to see, is this really that consistent? And I kind of tried on purpose to mess it up, but it still unfolds properly. So I can see people being worried about the new camera, but they actually do make everything work with it in mind. Besides, if it's going to be a new version of the game, it may as well be a new version of it, right? Not everything's got to be the same, so the changing camera, I'm on board with it. Oh, and the way they made the Otherworld look is absolutely fantastic. It sort of feels like they were drawing a little bit more visual influence from the Silent Hill 1 Otherworld, because in that one, and I guess in Silent Hill 3 as well, there's way more rusty imagery, way more of those metal industrial cages, and it feels like maybe they didn't make all of those assets yet when they were making Silent Hill 2, and then they didn't have it until 3. Here it feels way more like the Otherworld from 1 and 3. And that was really cool to see. It felt like you're bringing a little bit of that original Silent Hill flavor into the second game in a way that felt a little lacking in the original. Now, that said, I can see that being a change not everybody likes, because the Otherworld being less intensive and less industrial feeling in Silent Hill 2, you could have viewed that as, yeah, this is James's story. This isn't the story of the town, so the imagery is going to reflect that. I could see some people seeing that way. So it is a change I like, but I could see some people not being super into it. But I tell you, when you get to the Otherworld version of the apartments and you look down into the courtyard again and you're just staring at the shadowy abyss with these freaky, weird-looking cages protruding from it, something about that imagery is so potent and cool that it felt like I was in Silent Hill for the first time all over again. Now, one change I was worried about was the writing, like when you're picking up notes and you see things that are really relevant to James's story, but there's thematic overlap to what James is going through and what he did, what he's searching for, and I was a little worried that that stuff might end up feeling kind of cheesy and stupid. But I would say any of the new notes that are in this game, yeah, they actually do feel pretty well in line with the writing you would expect from the original. A lot of foreboding, cryptic, loose words that are describing the experiences of other people that feel oppressive and strange, surreal and freaky, and a lot of times just kind of make you think about what James is going through in a new way, which is kind of the purpose of it, so that's all still there. I think the only thing I saw that really stood out to me as kind of silly and cheesy is when you're in the prison and you come out and the words "reap what you sow" are scribbled on the wall, and I kind of rolled my eyes at it. I'm like, yeah, I know. okay, I thought that was a little goofy, but otherwise it's perfectly solid. And you know, a lot of the original writing and notes are still in the game. Some things aren't, like I didn't find a turn the numbers, that hint about the lock to the box. That was not in there. Like, some things aren't there, but a lot of the more important notes, especially the ones with a lot of thematic overlap to what James is experiencing, a lot of that stuff is still in the game. Though you will find many of them in totally different spots. Now, being a modern remake, you know, when you're interacting with the environment around you, they have all of these Last of Us styled button prompts, just all these floating little white circles in front of everything that you can interact with, and that was something that felt a little antithetical to the feeling of the original. The original Silent Hill 2 had no HUD, and I know that feels like a kind of a pretentious immersion thing to do, but it was a neat effect, you know? If there's a health drink, it's gonna stand out because of the way they carefully painted the scene, and that was something I felt was going to be completely lost with the new camera, and it's like, okay, yeah, now you just have to put a dot, or otherwise it's going to get completely lost and squashed together in this environment full of way too much AAA game detail, you know? Now, there is an option to turn the HUD off completely, and I find when games let you do that, it's a big old game of pretend. You try playing it like that for 10 minutes, and then you're like, okay, well, I can't find anything I'm supposed to look for, so you just end up groaning and turning it back on. That is what I expected to do in this game. But I beat the entire game with no HUD because holy shit, they actually designed every environment to bring your attention to the items in that same way. They just make it work with a new camera. They use careful lighting, or maybe the objects themselves stand out. Most of the time when you're finding a healing item, for example, it's in a bright orange box. And I feel like that box probably looked more like a traditional red or white first aid kit, but they chose a color that you're never going to miss. And even the health drinks, it's the same health drink design, and it still does a really good job of standing out. Again, just subtle lighting tricks. And you know, while brushing up against the corners of the environment while mashing the X button to get everything, that was kind of a go-to way to just find everything. That still mostly works, but I find it's a little finicky. I find I've brushed by items before mashing X and I didn't pick it up. Whether the circle, which is now invisible, is like solid or not, depending on your placement, I find that can be a little finicky sometimes. Now, obviously, it's a lot easier and readable when you just have the HUD on, but playing without the HUD, that did give me a problem sometimes. It could have felt like picking stuff up was, I don't know, the hitboxes should have been slightly bigger, I think. So I guess it's not perfect, but it's pretty much there. I was able to finish the entire game with no HUD on, and it felt like just like the original. I was blown away that that is a real viable way to play this game, and it made me pretty freaking happy, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, there were a couple of times where I missed a key item and ran around a little bit, and then I went back and then found it. But that was part of the experience of the original, was a little bit of running around confused until you realize, oh, I just missed one key item. So that is part of the experience you can put back in by removing the HUD. But of course, if you don't want to deal with that and you'd rather just find everything the first time you're in the room, play with the HUD on, and you won't have a hard time. But the fact that they have both options, I think is phenomenal. I really didn't expect that. Again, especially since most games, you turn the HUD off and then it's just actually not all that playable like they want to pretend to. So yeah, that was pretty freaking wicked sick. Now, exploring and looking for healing items and stuff, that is still a huge part of the gameplay, and that's something I love in survival horror games, is feeling like you're in this abandoned place and picking up the pieces that were left behind that can still aid you in your quest, whether it's healing stuff, or it's key items, or it's bullets for your gun and stuff like that. And I had such a blast looking around these environments. Again, this is the type of game where that sort of a lot of detail really goes a long way. You're opening drawers, you're going through old apartments, you're trying to find anything that helps, and it really encourages you to really look around and take in all this detail they put there. That is really how you do these sorts of games with all the detail. You gotta give the player a reason to actually look at it all, and looking for stuff that can be helpful, they did it. Now that's the stuff I was really hoping that they would get right, is the survival horror gameplay. How much is it gonna feel like I'm scraping by, and how much is it gonna be like if I just kind of know what to do? Like, you know, I've beaten a lot of these games. If I just use my per usual strats lightly, am I just gonna have an easy time? That's what I said to my wife. I clicked hard mode when I first played, and I said, if this doesn't give me a real challenge, if I beat this game without dying too many times, and if I get through every encounter and it feels like I'm already going through motions that I just kind of predicted and just did, then I'm gonna be a little disappointed by this. but I was happily pleased to see that the survival horror gameplay, yeah, it is challenging. It does feel like you're barely scraping by, and taking out enemies safely without getting hit, that involves real decision making. You're really thinking about what you have, and you're thinking about how confident you are in your ability to take out each enemy with what options you have. You're really making choices all the time. I actually found myself challenged by this game in a way that survival horror games on the first blind playthrough really should, even if I did kind of know what to expect from a lot of the major beats of the gameplay because it is a remake, but enough of it was different gameplay-wise that it was a whole new thing that I had to relearn, and it felt like I was playing a brand new survival horror game and learning the muscle memory, learning every enemy type, how to respond, what's better to use one bullet here and then whack them, or like, am I gonna just full on try to use melee and save bullets entirely? I was making those decisions every couple of moments, just like the original, and that is what I'm looking for most, and they got that here. So first, I guess I'll say that the health resources have been simplified. There's no longer 3 types of healing items. You used to have the health drink, which recovers a tiny bit, the first aid kits, which recovered about 70%, and the ampules, which were, I don't know, like a funny little vial with a substance that would just give you full health. There is no longer the middle one. They got rid of first aid kits. Now it's just health drinks, and they're not ampules anymore, they're just syringes, but now you just have the light heal and the full heal. That's it, nothing in between. Now, I believe the reason for this change is so the way you use the healing items could be mapped to the triangle button. So you tap triangle once to drink a health drink, and he does it in real time. It's not like off screen anymore. So healing now, I guess I'll compare it to like a Dark Souls game. You know, when you're in a boss fight, you have to find the time to heal so you don't get knocked out while healing. You have to heal in real time like that now, which I think is a good decision now that it's more action oriented. You have more control over the character. It's easier to move them around. You do have to stack things against you a little bit. So real time healing is one of the ideas they have here that I think is very effective. But yeah, you tap triangle to drink a health drink, and you hold triangle to give yourself a syringe and get full health. If it's just light and full, then you have like a binary choice, and you're scrambling in the moment, and it's not too much to decide. It's going to be an easier choice, but you still have to make the choice in the moment. I feel like reeling that back slightly, going from 3 to 2, made it work a lot better for a real-time heal thing. I'm a little bit bummed the ampules look totally different, but I'm really happy they kept that original health drink design. It was just such a good shape and series of colors that helped it stand out from the environment, while kind of looking iconic. You know, you look at this bottle, you know it's Silent Hill. And the game doesn't just give you a ton of resources either. Again, I was playing on hard, and it felt like I was barely getting anything. I really had to make the most out of what I had, or I was not going to have much left to really be very effective at all. Like, there was times I had no bullets, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna put one in this thing's knee and try to finish it off with the board, because I can't afford to be spending many bullets. But in doing that, it's like, oh god, I'm probably gonna get hurt. So let's get into the combat, because that was something I wasn't really blown away by when I saw the trailer. It looked so actiony and so visceral and intense, but I think it was more so the way the trailer was cut, because the combat, while it certainly looks a lot more actiony and violent, it really does feel like the same juggling of actions that you have to pay attention and be careful with if you want it to go well. And I was really surprised by that, because with the melee, you no longer time it. Before you held a button to get it ready, and then when you press the button, you got like a canned animation, either like a big drop down or like a swing, and the actual physical board making contact with the enemy is what did damage, but now it feels more like if you're close enough, you do the animation where you hit it, but if you're not close enough, you do the animation where you miss, and there's a clear distinction. It doesn't really feel like the pipe, you have to time it. It just feels like you gotta just press it when you're close enough. And it's like, oh no, that was the whole point of the combat. You know, people are like, oh, the combat's supposed to be clunky. No. The combat's supposed to be about timing, in the same way as Dark Souls, you know? I'm not saying it's Dark Souls because it's hard. I'm saying it's Dark Souls because it's about timing the swings. And that ended up being one of the reasons I really fell in love with like Bloodborne and stuff, because it reminded me of the combat in Silent Hill 2. Come around the corner, it's like, oh, don't get me, don't hit me. Okay, timing, now slow down and whack. Now when you get away from that, of course, it feels like, well, what's the challenge here then? Well, it's no longer about timing the melee, but it's now about timing the dodge. Yeah, you have a dodge button, which I guess you technically had like a block button in Silent Hill 2. There was a way to like defend, but you didn't really use it that much. Here, you're just pressing circle, and you literally have an iframes move. You press circle, and it's like the Dark Souls roll. You have iframes really briefly, so just if you time it right when they do their attack, you're gonna be invincible. Now that might not sound that hard, but again, think about Dark Souls. Reading the enemies and figuring out when they're going to attack and learning each one by one. It is that same sort of thing. So the jackets, for example, the most standard Goomba enemy, the ones that look like they're walking around in the straight jackets made out of skin and flesh. Skin and flesh, yeah, two different things, James. You can just go up and clobber them, but you have to carefully look for the animation that's going to mean they're going to lunge at you. And if you don't time it right, they'll hit you. And it's so easy to panic mash, like I just go on a panic dodge before I really learned the movements, but I would keep dying. Before I really learned when to put that, I actually kept dying against these enemies, and it felt hard. I felt like, what am I doing wrong? Oh my god, I'm getting my ass beat. But the more I tried, and the more I was patient with it, and the more I started trying to relax and just time it with careful presses instead of mashing, then I was getting in with the swings, I was getting out, I was kicking them when they're down, I was saving bullets, and it wouldn't work every time. It wouldn't work every time because there is a degree of sporadicness to when the enemy is going to attack you, but you can still look. You can still look for the lunge and try to time it, but it's like, it's only so much, right? So even though you can definitively get good at it, and there is like a clear back and forth, yeah, there's a right way to interact with the combat in a way that you can just come out unscathed, it's still really hard to the point where every time I come up to an enemy and I think I could save some bullets, I'm never, ever 100% certain that I will do it without getting hit. A lot of times I do, and I'm like, yes, I got to save some pistol bullets. But other times I'm like, ow, no, why didn't I just shoot him? And then I end up just popping out the gun and anger, like, whatever, just shoot him, I don't care. And then I just used bullets, and I got hurt, and I was like, that was a bad decision. But it's like, but it was also kind of a safer decision, because if I just tried to continue meleeing, I probably could have taken more damage. So it's like, I'm always wondering how good every decision I made was. Now, the gunplay, of course, is totally different. It's more traditional. You just aim, and you move the stick to aim, and you actually have to land the shots. It's no longer this plant your feet and auto-aim sort of thing, which, I'm not gonna lie, like the auto-aim gunplay in the original Silent Hill was really easy, or the original Silent Hill games, it was pretty easy. It was just the go-to method when you didn't want to try using the melee combat. So it was more about the decision-making than the action when it comes to gunplay in the original, but this one, it's more of both, because you can miss, and it's quite easy to miss, actually. You don't feel like Leon S. Kennedy. You don't feel like super CSI action military man. You feel like some regular dude.
The CSI, I meant CIA.
And keep in mind those twitchy heads, right? Like, headshots are the way to go, but they're moving so much, that's really hard. Do you really want to risk that? Well, maybe if you got the rifle and there's one far away and a carefully timed shot, boom! One bullet, one enemy gone. Good. But that was a risk, because sometimes I miss, and it's like, no, I just used one of my best bullets. Missing with the rifle feels like just wasting $50 in this game. The nurse heads too, like, it just makes so much sense. They're twitching out. Try getting a headshot on that, right? It's really challenging. It depends on how many enemies are around too, because like you got hallways, you got open areas. If it's an open area, you can try and lure one out and hit the guy with the pipe, and the other guy's coming, and you quickly whip out the pistol and shoot him in the knee, and then you finish this guy off, and especially when this jacket's like crawling around too, making their noises, and they're freaking out, going everywhere, and those ones are great because you want to melee the ones on the floor. You just want to stomp on them with your feet. But since the camera looks at what you are melee attacking so aggressively, sure, looking at gameplay, it feels like, oh, they made it action-y, but no, this is to make it disorienting, because when you're committing to meleeing one enemy, the camera's freaking out so much, you don't really have much sense of what's around you anymore in the same way that you would have if you held back and started firing at them. So that is also part of the risk as well, is you need to keep a situational, 3D awareness around you regardless of what the camera can see. The radio really helps with that too, because imagine you're swinging a pipe at one dude and the camera's looking at the ground, you're beating the crap out of him, and he's like dead, but you still hear the radio, and it's like, suddenly, I gotta flail the camera around, I gotta quick turn around, I gotta look everywhere, there's still something in here, and I gotta find it before it finds me and before it hits me, right? The new camera actually lends itself to such a panic-induced frenzy that it... man, like, I really love this combat. I really love this combat. It feels like Resident Evil 2 and 4 remakes combat, but dialed back like you're a regular dude. And as for guns, we still got the pure, simple three most basics, just your pistol, shotgun, and rifle. You don't get any more than that, but I like having a survival horror game that's more about the horror and the more grounded survival. You're not getting rocket launchers, super gun, whippy-flippy-doo like Kennedy is. You're just like James Sunderland. You're just like, I just have whatever I happen to find, and that's not gonna be something like a super duper gun. But all three options feel so situational and so different. Like, of course, the pistol is good for filling their body with bullets before they can get close to you, or maybe popping one in the knee to make them fall over so you can get a good swing on them. Oh, the knees are so hard to hit because their legs are so thin. It's really easy. It's like, okay, I know if I shoot him in the leg, then he's down, I'm gonna whack him, I'm gonna save bullets. Yes, I killed this guy with one handgun bullet. That always feels amazing. But you're shooting legs, which is so much harder to shoot the body, so it's like, you can pump 4 into the body and guarantee a kill, or you can maybe waste 5 hitting the leg. Again, decision making that always feels like sometimes I mess it up, and when I don't mess it up, it's like, yes! Shotgun's really great for knocking things over. It was basically my go-to. If there's a harder version of an enemy, and it's by itself, okay, I'm using one shotgun bullet because I know that will just knock it over. I can whack it down with the pipe. I'm good. But the thing about that is even that's challenging. It felt like, okay, yeah, this works consistently. But guess what? You have to be so close to them or they don't fall over. And then there was times where I put 1 shotgun blast into them, and then 2, and then 3, and then they died, and it felt like, wait, what happened? Was I not close enough? I just used 3 bullets when I thought I was gonna use 1. Crap. So you start learning that and you're like, okay, I'm gonna be closer next time. I get up real close and what happens? It goes over the nurse's shoulder and I miss and then it's hitting me and it's like, no, this went wrong. So even though you're using a shotgun, which feels like the definitive knock 'em over, do it every time, you still have to do it right. It's still challenging to pull that action off. You can still mess it up. It feels like that for every decision. Every decision has a degree of error that you still have to skillfully overcome in order to make the most of your resources. It feels like it has that challenging gameplay half that the original only kind of got half right. You know, it felt like the challenging gameplay half was really just in the melee, and then the guns were the safe option. Now, even the safe option also feels challenging. Less challenging, of course, it feels safer to use the guns, but it still feels like you gotta do it right, or you're not gonna really be doing well later. That's all what it's about, and I love that. The more you do well now, the more safe you'll be later, and the more you mess up now, the less you can mess up later. It's like this constant scales, this constant engagement, this constant thought about what I have, how to make use of it, and in every situation, I'm gonna do something a little bit different to try and make the best of this. Yeah, this is what I love from survival horror games, and it's so good here. I can't believe this is done this well, but playing it and surviving and doing the combat, it is some of the most fun I've actually had playing a game like this. And when I say game like this, I mean the over-the-shoulder stuff. I'm talking RE2 Remake, Dead Space, Evil Within. This is some of the most fun I have had with that kind of game, and with how much I thought this game was gonna be a piece of poop, I'm blown away and I'm really happy about it. Oh my god, okay, so there's enemy types, right? If you're gonna have decision making and this challenging resource management, you gotta have all these different types of enemies. Now this remake doesn't introduce any new enemy characters, it is still just the jackets, the mannequin legs, the nurses, and the hanging guys that you see like 2 times in the whole game and never have to really fight. It is still just that pool of enemies. But now there's more variety in the way these enemies can behave. They feel more different from each other, and there's even more variation to them as well. There's 2 types of jackets, there's 2 types of the leg things, and there's 2 types of nurses. Of all the enemies, the jackets are probably the ones that are the most similar to how they were in the original. You know, they'll be like squirming and wobbling at you, and they're gonna be spewing all this acid at you that you'll have to just kind of run by holding L1 and strafing side to side to dodge that, or you can just like dodge it with a circle button. And then they'll also do that little head ram thing at you if you're real close. But it's all about getting around the projectile of acid and hitting them from the side. And then they can also fall down, and then they'll squirm around like a snake, and you gotta chase after them. When they're on the ground, again, that's when you want to get them. If you see a jacket already on the ground, that's the first thing you're going to want to take out, because that'll take the least amount of hits. Again, I'm not even playing the game, and I'm already thinking about like the order of what to deal with. Now there's a second version of the jacket that's a little harder. I guess they had these harder versions in the original too, but they feel more like actual different enemies in this one. I mean, on top of having more health and being more aggressive, they also just blow up into a bunch of acid spewing everywhere whenever you beat one. So these guys, you're whacking them, but you're also like, when it's time to get away from this thing, because when he dies, like, you gotta sprint or you're gonna take a bunch of damage. The mannequin legs are very different, way more aggressive than in the original. I would say they were the easiest enemy in the original. Now they're a completely different enemy. They look and act a little bit the same, but they made like a whole new enemy type out of them. So their whole thing is they hide. And they're stiff, they're just like, maybe they're under a table, maybe they're like up against a wall. They're posing as mannequins, and you have to like look around and find them before they just come out at you. And sometimes, I keep bringing up the Dark Souls comparison, sorry, but I've hella Dark Souls brain right now because I've just been playing a lot of Dark Souls too. But you remember when you like go in a room, and if you like don't check the corners immediately left to right, there's gonna be a guy who comes up and backstabs you? Similar thing too, you gotta check your corners coming in every room, or one of those things might just pop up at you. Now this makes a lot of sense because the whole game is now completely centered around aiming a camera. So here's a new idea that complements that new camera system. You couldn't really do that in the original because you have such a wider view of everything, right? I came into a room and there is a ceiling fan, and I thought that was legs on the ceiling, and I'm thinking, oh, legs aren't up there. When are legs going to be up there? Lo and behold, that is the second type of legs enemy. You find them kind of later in the game, but there's ones that'll crawl up the walls, and then suddenly you gotta look all around, especially creepy when you're in the prison. And now the ceiling is so tall. Remember the prison in Silent Hill 2? Think about that. You never knew how tall the ceilings were because you couldn't look up. And now when you look up, and it feels like the walls just go up into infinity until it just meets the darkness, and you're looking up there trying to like, where are the legs? Where are the legs? It's so freaking fun. Now, of course, you got the nurses, and they're just kind of, I'd say they're the closest to the original. They just kind of walk around and whack you with the pipe, but they are the most aggressive melee-wise. They will usually swing up to 3 times in a row, and that was something tricky to learn because you dodge one, and then you get hit by the next one. Then you learn to dodge one, time the next one, and then you get hit by the third one. And that's fantastic because the nurses were the one enemy you did not want to get close to. That is very much the case here. Now all of these enemies are fun to engage with, each on their own, but it's when you start getting into these combat scenarios where you get different types of environments. Maybe it's a long hallway, maybe this hallway has a little more room, maybe it's a big square, maybe it's a square with some ways you can run around, and then you start placing multiple types of enemies at once. You're dodging the acid spew of a jacket while also making sure a nurse doesn't get too close to you. Who are you going to deal with first? You're going to start shooting at the knees, you're going to use a shotgun to knock the nurse over. When you're juggling multiple enemies at once, it becomes this chaotic rigmarole of running around and trying to make these moment-to-moment decisions. Some parts had that evil within ass level design where you're running around and they have all of these things for you to squeeze through and vault over. Actually felt like a little bit of the Last of Us 2 encounters sometimes. Speaking of Last of Us 2, I think the best feature of that game was just the ability to break glass. You saw a window or a vending machine or anything, you just break it and you grab what's inside. They put that mechanic in this game. You're breaking car windows, you're breaking storefront windows, you're breaking glass all around the place, maybe to find a way in, or maybe just to grab an item. There's one part where there's like a vending machine, you smash the glass and grab the health drink out of it. There's something so satisfying about that, and it feels very organic too, right? Like if you are exploring an abandoned town, and you have a metal freaking pipe or a board, you have the means of breaking this stuff. It doesn't belong to anybody anymore, you're not going to not do that. It feels like part of the experience, like what you would be doing in that that situation. It's so cool. It's like a little tiny thing, but it adds so much. It never gets old. It never gets old just breaking glass and seeing what's inside. I love that. So with all the new focus on survival horror action, there are now new action sequences. There's some parts where it's like, okay, suddenly there's a ton of enemies, and you're not even really expected to fight them all. It's really trying to get through them all, or lasting until the siren goes away and then everything's safe again. And, you know, it kind of feels, again, a little like, is that really what Silent Hill 2 is about, is action sequences? But when you're making a game, like this type of game out of it, and that's what the gameplay ends up being, and the gameplay's fun and good, you want to explore that, right? And they do, and I think they do a really good job. Like, some of those action sequences were really fun. It was bringing me right back to Resident Evil 4, or Evil Within, or Dead Space. I love when you're going through the town and it's that action sequence, and they make it so windy, the fog is just rolling by, you have all this paper and leaves just going nuts, and there's this energy to the scene to kind of complement the fact that it's an action scene. They always have some sort of visual to help push the feeling of what's happening gameplay-wise. So goodness gravy and mustard on a hot dog, color me impressed, man. Like, this is my favorite kind of game. Is that survival horror? I'm squeezing through my resources. I'm trying to make every shot count. You do have to make every shot count. It feels like its own take on that sort of thing. It doesn't feel like it's rehashing Leon or Isaac Clarke. It feels like its own pulled back, grounded, I'm just some random dude version of that. And it's rather intense, and it's really tense. It's awesome. I can't believe that, like, that's what I was hoping for the most from this. And I was expecting it to not be so great. I was hoping for it to be a little better than that. But what I got was a genuinely fantastic take on the over-the-shoulder resource management survival horror combat, and I couldn't be freaking happier with it, dude. Now, just like the combat, the map design, like the level design, is also rather different, which that part I didn't really expect as much. Now, the first part of the town you explore, the side with the Happy Burger, that is pretty much identical. Like the maps looking side by side, they pretty much look the same. Now, there are some differences, like you can go in more of the buildings, there's some new puzzles here. The way you navigate it, it's loosely based on the way you go through it. Like, you got to go to Neely's bar and all that stuff, but what you do is totally different. You're doing a different thing in Neely's bar. All the puzzles are different here, and there's some new optional stuff too. Like, this was one of the first big areas where you could really explore in the original, looking for resources. You know, you go to the left of the Happy Burger, and the reason the Happy Burger is significant, not because you can go inside it and look around, but because there's a health pack here. That's why you want to go to the Happy Burger. It's like that, but even more. There's more stuff you can go in, more places to look for resources, and even though there's more places to look for resources, I feel like they're better at spreading it out around. This should be the last thing I say about the resources, just because I forgot to mention it. They don't give you very much, at least on hard mode. Like, when I picked up bullets, I was getting like two or three. So they really hold back on that on hard mode. I was really happy to see that. And yeah, that just encouraged me to really want to take on the side stuff. I wanted to find out how to get through that keypad into the Silent Hill market. How do I get in there? What's in there? Now, I guess like the pacing of the story, like the story beats you do in order, they are all the same. You start by coming into town, then you do the apartments, you come back out, explore the town again, then you do the hospital, you come out, then it's the town at nighttime, and then you do the last handful of things. That is all exactly the same. But the levels themselves are totally different. Like, when I first came into the apartments, it didn't even look like the same building. It is aesthetically based on it. Like, the wallpaper will look similar. A lot of the rooms are still in there. The hallways that feel like the hallways, you know, the ones with all the different apartments. Like, it's based on the same idea, and the same rooms are there. It's just all completely rearranged and totally differently organized. And it must be that way because they were making a new game. They're thinking about new progression with the new gameplay and stuff. So it was really weird seeing the maps completely different, but I guess I understand why it was like that. But they even add a lot to every level. I would say most areas are triple the size. Yeah, triple the size. The apartments felt like there's 3 times as much to it. Same with the hospital, and even the next 2 after that feel triple the size. The only one that doesn't feel triple is the last one, although it does still feel longer. There's more puzzles, there's a lot of new puzzles, and there's way more rooms to go through, and I got really mixed feelings about it because it does feel like there's way more here than what you played through before, and none of it's bad. Like, none of the puzzles are bad. I really like them, and all the new puzzles, and I was playing on hard puzzle difficulty. Me and my wife, we were putting our heads together. It felt just like when I was playing Silent Hill 1 with my buddy Daniel for the first time. We're really trying to think about, like, the piano puzzle. Like, all the new puzzles are similarly cryptic. Some of them are really good. Like, I love the one when you have to find the safe combination to Jack's Inn. My first answer was the right one. I just didn't think about the way to enter it correctly. So you get what you think is the right answer, then you try it, and it's like, oh, it can't be that. And then you start overthinking it. They do that thing where, like, it's actually simpler than you think, but it's designed to have a red herring or a misleading clue that you start thinking way harder about it, and then you go back to your original solution and recontextualize a little bit. It's like, oh my god, it was just that. The new puzzles I was actually pretty impressed by. Now, some of that extra length does feel a bit like padding. Like, the amount of times you have to find a cart and move it across the room to climb up. You never don't know what to do with this thing. It's the same thing every time, and you do it so many times. It felt like they took a page out of The Last of Us just because it was a modern horror game and not because it was a fun thing to do. Same with breaking the walls, man. Like, that's something else I felt like you do a little bit too much. It's not like breaking glass where you just go boop and then you climb over. It's like, no, you gotta stop and make a whole thing out of it. And you do it so many times that at a point it's just like, oh great, another wall, time to stop and whack it a bunch of times again. It's so weird because there are a lot of additions to, like, the way James marks things on the map to make it harder to miss items. There are things in place here to help you avoid wasting time. But even with that, it sometimes feels like it takes forever to get through some of these levels. Another thing I don't really like that much is any moment where James is reaching into something, they make it like this little interactive gameplay thing where you have to keep pressing X again to make him reach in further. Before, it was like this handcrafted animation. It was this moment where he reaches in and he feels like he pulls the hand back and he goes, oh, and then he reaches back in, and it was a nice little tense moment that was carefully crafted. Now it just feels like canned animations that you do more than once and it looks exactly the same each time, and by the end of it you're just mashing X and it just feels like meaninglessly interactive. I don't really like how they changed these. And they also start to feel like padding when you do it so many times. You didn't reach into the hole with the same animation over and over for the sake of it in the original, and even the toilet too. Like, in the original, that's such an iconic weird moment, but in this version, it's one of these, and it's like, oh, we're just doing this again. The real big reason the levels feel so much longer, though, is because there's always this moment where there is a central puzzle that you need all the components to, and then you have to go through a whole new section to get one of the things you need to do that puzzle. In the apartment, it's the clock. You need the 3 hands before you can do the puzzle. In the hospital, it's that box. I don't like the way they made the box like this central lobby piece. Like, look at the box, it's so big and in the middle. In the original game, it was just at the end of a hall on the left in a room just by itself, and that made it feel so much more quiet and cryptic and just estranging. But here it's this big obnoxious set piece that's trying so hard to make you think it's like this important thing. But hey, at least the sequences you have to go through to get each of the items to do one of these central puzzles, they are still really fun to do. So yeah, I'm really mixed on what I guess you could consider padding. A lot of it is fun, some of it feels meaningless, but ultimately, I do think it makes the game a little bit too long. That is my single biggest criticism of this remake, is that, while when you're playing through it again and you do know what to do, you can get through it a lot faster, still not nearly as fast as the original. It takes so much longer to get through, and it makes me wonder, like, how much am I going to want to go through and get all of those endings again? And people can say, oh, no, don't worry, you can save scum to do some of them, but it's like, but that's not the experience, right? That's not what I did when I played the original. It felt like I wanted to play this thing over and over because I love it. I have a slightly different experience every time with it. There's new weapons and stuff, like when you get the chainsaw, and the chainsaw, it's like, it feels OP, but it's still really hard to hit things with, so you have a new weapon. It feels like playing Bloodborne again with a new weapon. You're trying new things. It makes the playthrough different. And the fact that you're rewarded with a brand new ending each time, that was the experience. And when you feel the need to save scum to get the endings instead because the game's too long, that kind of feels like it lost something. The replayability of this thing, it lost a little bit when you made the game that much longer. Sure, I feel like I got my money's worth of content in the game, but at the end of the day, 10 years later, when I'm not thinking about the money I spent on this thing anymore, am I still going to be replaying it as much as the original?
The answer's no.
The chainsaw, while more powerful, doesn't offer a new gameplay experience. It feels too close to using the pipe, and the vastly longer length makes it impossible to whip through in one day again in the same way I would do with Silent Hill 2 original all the time.
Like, it took me like 4 days to beat. I think my final playtime was like 20 hours. Maybe it'd be like 8 hours on a replay knowing what to do, but that's still so much more than the original, you know? So that is my major criticism of it, is that replays take way longer than I'd like. And it's so weird too, because certain things felt like they were oversimplified. Now this is something I loved about the original, is every time you got a key item, it felt like, what do I do with this? You know, they're random objects and you have to think of contextually, like, what could I possibly use this on? So, for example, in the original Silent Hill 2, when you got the canned juice in the apartments, it's just a big, heavy object, and there's no use for it. There's nothing you need to pour it on, or you're not gonna drink it or anything. You know, it's not a healing item. And then you find, oh, this stuff stuck in the trash chute. I just need a heavy object. Boom! And then you get it through. In the remake, the trash chute is right beside the juice. So there's no like aha moment, there's no thinking about it yourself. You don't solve the puzzle anymore. You just grab an item and just immediately use it on what's in front of you. And I felt the same way about the fire escape too. Like, it used to be you get the fire escape key and you're like, okay, what's the fire escape? And then you go to the end of the hallway and you see that door that looks like a fire escape door. You're like, oh, it's this. And then you open the door and then the next building's like right beside it and you realize, oh my God, this building doesn't have a proper like building code fire exit because they built another right beside it and it kind of told a little bit of a story, and it was neat when you found it and put those together yourself. That is all gone in the remake. When you go through the door to go to the Blue Creek apartments, it's just there in some random person's apartment. They now make it like, oh, it's the evil dimension door, and the Blue Creek apartments are now the evil dimension version, and it's all so different. And hey, it's fine, whatever, but yeah, little things like that, the aha moments, a lot of those did get lost. I don't think they should have tripled the size of every level if they doubled it. That would have been just bringing it back a little bit. I think that would have been better. I did like how a lot of the puzzles were brand new, but based on the original ones. For example, the coin puzzle on, like we were playing on hard riddle difficulty, and the coin puzzle was like this whole new thing. It is like the same box and the same coins, but now you can flip them. The poem is different. The way you have to infer it is this whole new thing. Same with the clock puzzle. I was thinking, oh, what happened to Henry Mildred Scott? No, it's a whole new puzzle made out of that same clock. Though, if you do play on easy, it is just the old classic Henry Mildred Scott, so some of the puzzles are the same depending on which level you chose. But man, I really hate how decryptified some of these puzzles were. The lady on the door, for example, like, you know, you got the big whole set piece with the box. Now the lady on the door is just part of the set piece, but before it was just kind of there. Like, it was clearly important because you know, how it stood out, but the fact that it stood out in such a quiet, strange, and unsettling way, I don't know, there was something deeply creepy about it in the original. In the remake, it feels like I'm going through a Donkey Kong 64 boss fight door and I expected to slam shut behind me with an evil laugh. It's weird how much of the surreal nature of the game's areas was kind of removed. Here, for example, was one of my favorite spots. This ladder goes down to this room. This doesn't even make sense physically. What could be the possible purpose of this room? I can't even think of one, and it just added so much to the sense of, I don't know if this is taking place in reality. Now the ladder is still there, but you just get the item beside it, and you don't go down into that space anymore. It's not, there is no longer this acknowledgement of these bizarre, inexplainable spaces. And the labyrinth don't count, because that's the whole point of the labyrinth. It felt intrusive, invasive to reality, when there's just a little trickle of impossibility in the geometry around you. Ramble so frickin' long, and need another frickin' Friday for it. I don't even know if it's Friday. I don't know what day it is. Probably Thursday. Who cares? Day 2 of talking about the Silent Hill 2 remake. Sorry this video's gone so long, but it's Silent Hill, man. It's so special, I got a lot to say about it. So I guess we just got the story left to talk about. Or where are we so far? Okay, so yeah, I would say so far, survival horror gameplay, like the game that is in here, how fun that is to play, excellent. That's the best part about this in my eyes. Also, the presentation and like the visuals, how much they nail the artwork, how good this thing is to look at and explore, also excellent. Now, puzzles, content, and level design, that's the thing I'm a little iffy on. I'm about like 60, 60-70% about that one. I really do like a lot of the new puzzles, but again, some of it feels like needless modernization, the cart stuff. I think the vaulting and stuff, I don't know if I brought up vaulting, like vaulting and crawling under stuff, having more options for mobility, that enhances the action sequences, but I think some of the modernization doesn't really matter. And also, yeah, it just drags a little bit too, here and there, and certain set pieces being made out of things that felt subtle and cryptic. So all of that stuff, yeah, 60-70%, where the other two, I think I'm just like fully satisfied with, and now what's left is a story, and I know that's a big thing people are really wanting to hear about. So we're gonna do full-on spoilers in a moment here, but first I do want to get across the general sentiment that personally, I would say, yeah, the story is fairly intact here. They didn't change anything. They didn't change the message of the story. And that's something that we were really scared about because Blooper hasn't really been the best for handling those sorts of themes. Some people might even thought they were going to rewrite it to try and make you feel more sympathetic for characters you probably, that's not really the point of this, anyway, doesn't matter. That's all still there. Any small changes, there's very small changes. There's like a couple of line changes. Some scenes take place in different places, and there's a handful of new scenes entirely. But I liked all of it. I think it really only just helps the message they're trying to get across, the story that's happening. It just aids it in being understandable to the audience. And it doesn't spell it out either. It's still rather subtle. It's just, I'd say, slightly more clear, and they also enhance the characterization as well. And I'll give some real examples for it in a second, but now we're gonna do full-on spoilers. If you don't want to hear about the story stuff, I'd say skip here. I'm gonna talk about what I think about the voice acting and all the story changes and all that stuff. And then at the end, I guess I'll wrap up my thoughts in where I think this remake stands in history and what this should be versus this and that, whatever, I don't know. Yeah, full spoilers ahead. Your last chance to skip. So considering how character-driven a story this is, I guess I'll do the story character by character, starting with James. Like, what do I think about this new interpretation of James? It's certainly not the same. The original James really felt way more like just some guy, because the voice actor, it was like lightning in a bottle. It's just some weird dude, like Guy Chihi. He also kind of didn't really understand the character that much, but that helped him play the character in a weirdly biased way, because he was just coincidentally mentally biased in the same way that James probably would have been, and that just created this really lightning in a bottle performance. And it was also campy too, like the way he says thanks after like him and Maria open the fridge.
Not very cute, is it? Here, James, you take it.
Thanks.
That's one of my favorite moments of the game. It makes me chuckle so much every time. So the original James voice acting was really something that can't really be replaced. This new iteration of James feels so much less like some dude is talking, and more like it is a Hollywood actor doing a dramatic performance.
Mary! Oh. Maria, I thought... Sorry.
Though while the texture and the mood of the voice is certainly far different, I do think it does a decent job of getting across the same sorts of things that the original voice acting did. And I do think the voice overall is pretty well acted. It is good.
She's not here. And why would she be? I don't even remember this place.
Like I've said many times in this video, I don't care if it doesn't do the exact same thing, as long as the new interpretation I think is also good. And I do think James's new voice is rather good. Now sometimes, again, I think I said this very early on, it does feel like he pushes the drama, the emotions like a little bit too much.
Yeah, 3 years ago, it's just, I got a letter from her.
I don't know, I think he's pushing he's so out of breath. The raspiness of the voice a little bit much.
But overall, that may have felt like that a couple of times, but the more time I really spent with this new voice, the more it really grew on me. It does have that same sense of hollowness, that shallow self-pity that James carried with him the whole time is still very present. And I do also really love the disconnectedness. Again, it's psychological horror. Everyone has their own lifetime of issues that have created their own reality for them, and that also makes it hard for people to successfully communicate with one another, and you do still feel that sensation, like when James is talking to Angela.
It's kind of hard to explain, but
I'll be careful.
I'm not lying.
No, I believe you. It's just... I guess I don't really care if it's dangerous or not. I'm going either way.
there is still a sense of distance, like they are both still in their own worlds. It's not for the same happy accident reason, but I do like that they did clearly aim to recreate that sensation.
Someone very important to me.
Me too. I'm looking for my mama. I mean, my mother.
So this script's not exactly the same, they kind of change words here and there, but it does always get across basically the same thing. Most script changes honestly felt like just rearranging the words to make it easier for the actors just to have it roll off the tongue. Sometimes there are what feels like very deliberate changes to the script, just changing the words that they exchange and the pacing of it, but anytime it's a change like that, it's never really something I would disagree with. It's, yeah, just something I would say helps the idea get across. But there are some cool little details that are still just in the original that do get a little lost. Like, I like the way James is more so interrupting Angela when she's trying to explain in the original.
And it's not just the fog either.
Okay, I got it. I'll be careful.
It is a bit of a bummer to lose all the adorable camp and, you know, some of those nice little details as well, but if there's one thing I do admire here, it's the consistency. Like, they never drop the act to go for a reference or a joke or to ever try to do, like, camp on purpose. No, it's a new interpretation of a serious story, so they take it seriously 100% of the time.
So as far as like a modern, you know, a more dramatic modern movie sounding voice acting is going to be in this thing,
Yeah, I'd say it's just about as good as it needs to be. As for characterizing James, here's a really good example that demonstrates that they really do understand the point of his character here. There's a brand new scene where Maria takes you to the statue and she tells you about this old urban legend to the Silent Hill town that people would believe in.
She kept coming out at night, kept lighting the candle to bring her beloved home, to lead him to shore.
Now, I was horrified watching this. I was like, oh no, are they gonna try to be like, oh, and this explains the lore to that? And it's, you know what I mean. Leaning into explaining the four-dimensional placement of every tangible object within the universe instead of understanding the themes the story's trying to get across. But no, it was just meant for thematic overlap and to see James's reaction, to see where he is mentally currently. Like, the story is clearly meant to symbolize how long Mary waited for James to come back to her. Mary died of that damn disease 3 years ago. No, she died to you 3 years ago, James. That's when you stopped seeing her, which means for 3 years she waited for him to come back and visit her. She lit the candle every night and James never came. But the way James reacts, you can tell that he has not figured that out yet.
She's not here.
All he got from the story in this moment was a bunch of self-pity. He is yet to think about it from Mary's perspective. Another great characterization is, the way he looks straight into the camera at every save point. Right after the final scene with Angela, when he finally gets it, when he truly understands finally what she's really going through, he will not look at you anymore. Yeah, you can tell he just saw a certain something in himself for the first time, and yeah, now he's got a lot of thinking to do about it. So yeah, I'm not entirely satisfied with the voice. I'd say I'm about like 80% with it, but I do love a lot of the new characterization. It just really feels like they understood his character and they played with that. They explored it a little bit further in a way that I think is actually quite meaningful and not like this shallow for the fans way.
I guess next up we have Angela, and that is the second character you see. Oh my god. Dude, I was so worried. I was so worried they were gonna mess Angela up because she does have the most sensitive themes to her story. The trauma she's gone through, that's a hard thing to talk about without just outright showing it for shock value or having imagery that really is too much. Silent Hill 2 is one of the few pieces of media that's been really effective at having that conversation while being delicate and subtle with it. That's a difficult thing to do. I would say that is all still very much intact, and if anything, I think some exchanges are a little bit enhanced. So Angela's voice, I think, is perfectly fitting. I think just the same as James. I don't think it doesn't really feel as cheesily emotional sometimes, though. I really like Angela's voice actress. She does a fantastic job of getting across panic attacks, anxiety. I'm sorry.
And the animation too, like the pain on her face. It's like you feel that, man.
You hear moments where James will say certain words, and they clearly affect Angela so much. It's like a waterfall, an avalanche of trauma just coming back just from a couple of words in the right place from the right kind of person, right back to memories of her father.
You didn't happen to see a little girl around here, did you?
A little girl?
Yeah,
Okay, now think about where that line just put her mentally.
Angela? Are you You all right?
And now there's a guy she doesn't know carrying a gun with him in front of her.
Angela?
No. Please.
And just seconds earlier, she was saying this.
No, it's fine.
You really feel that, and there's I almost want to say an even stronger, more apparent sense of empathy that you're clearly meant to feel for this character in this game. Again, without them trying to make you feel really bad, because that is a common trapping of media. Is like, look how bad this person has. It's never gonna get better for them, and don't you want to feel bad for them? That's a mistake Bloopers made before. Is like, look how hopeless that is. You can't accept hopelessness as the reason to empathize with them, because that almost just trivializes the purpose of empathy.
You know, to help people heal.
Oh my god, the end when she's like, for me it's always like this, that almost hits harder. And again, this is another spot where I think James's voice really bounces off of her well, because you feel James identifying with that pain, and then suddenly it's real. Oh my, you feel like this all the time. One thing I was really interested in seeing how they would do is, it's the symbolism in the boss fight when you fight the abstract daddy, which is the manifestation of the trauma and Angela's father and stuff. That whole fight and sequence has been turned into this whole huge, ridiculous boss fight. It feels like something straight out of the first Evil Within game. That's troubling, right? It's like, oh no, you're taking what's supposed to be one of the most potent pieces of like, hey, this is what this means. Oh, Jesus Christ, you know what I'm talking about. And you turn that into this big action fest. But then you play it, and it feels like that they have kind of recontextualized this fight as a way to directly put you in the shoes of Angela. And when you run into the closet away from her father, it's like, oh my god, this is what this felt like for her. I can see some people not liking that. It's not quite as subtle as the original. I think there is, again, they don't quite say the quiet part out loud. You do still have to infer it. It is just a little more in your face, yeah.
But you could also see that being like the AAA prerequisites. If you guys are making this game for this kind of budget, for this kind of audience, you gotta have it get a little zany, I guess. So if they're going to do that anyway, they may as well use it to get that message across. And I think that's why I really like it so much.
And the symbolism with the pistons and the wall, like, I was wondering if they were gonna still have that. They don't have it done the exact same way, but they do have the same idea. So it's like the industrial imagery. Now, right before the boss room, you see this big piston, and it's like, oh my god, yeah, that only means one thing. But meshing it into the industrial imagery, it feels a little more consistent, like what that industrial imagery is meant. It's the oppressing force, it's the selfishness, it's the I'm going to do this regardless of the suffering it causes, the rusty machine fed by pain and flesh, right? And when you blend those images together now, it kind of feels like, okay, this is the consistent narrative that Silent Hill is interested in showing the people that end up here. So that was like a cool touch. I really thought that was really neat.
So yeah, I was pretty worried about how Angela would be portrayed, how much of her story was going to still be preserved and present and respected, but I would say I am 100% happy with it. Though of course my perspective is only so wide, so if you don't agree, I would love to hear what you think.
Oh, but my favorite is Eddie. I cannot believe how much more impactful the scenes with Eddie are. Let's be real, like, Eddie was a little goofy in the original, and that was a big part of like the charming, adorable, campy voice acting. But if you're gonna do a new Eddie, he feels way realer. Not just because he looks more like a real person, but his mannerisms. The part when James comes in and you see him for the second time, because, you know, the first time you see him, he's throwing up. So James sees him and he's eating ice cream now. I'll get to how they changed the food in a second, but he's eating ice cream now. In part of the conversation, James just goes, well, I'm glad to see you got your appetite back. And he means that wholeheartedly, like, I'm happy to see you're doing better, right? But because it's about food, Eddie infers it that way, about weight. And he doesn't tell you that. You just see it on his face. Just a subtle expression change, and he stops eating. And then suddenly it's like, oh my, this is something Eddie's been bothered by. Other people reminding him of that. And by the end, when he's like, you're just like him, James, you've been laughing at me the whole time. You buy that this time because you saw how he was in his own brain and his own world because of the way he's been affected by what's happened to him in his life.
And that is a very real thing with the human brain. When you are inferring things in a way that you have been trained to, it affects your ability to communicate with people. It affects your ability to fucking live, man.
The boss fight, when you end up killing him, it feels a lot more like I killed a human being with real nuance to them, with real problems and emotions. Where in the original, he's like, if anyone messes with me, I'll kill him. Just like that. Like, that line was so goofy, the first time I heard it was in Gmod Idiot Box. I mean, that's why we love the original, and it's part of why you should still play the original if you love the new story. Because seeing the origins of how, like, certain scenes were a little goofier, that is also part of the fun.
I gotta run. You're going out there alone?
Yeah.
But man, I gotta say, the new delivery really gets across this sense of aimlessness, running away, deflecting all blame, not taking responsibility, and you end up lost.
I didn't do it, I swear!
Hey.
I didn't do it. I swear I didn't kill him.
Yeah, it's all right. I'm not saying that you did.
And the sense of panic the new voice gets across. Like, I've had panic attacks where I'm repeating the same phrase over and over and over. That's all I can really do in the moment, and it's just like, you're struggling, man. That really comes across in a great way here. The new performance really leans into this idea of dodging blame, dodging the conversation he needs if he's ever going to help himself. This scene right here is one of my favorite new interpretations of any of the scenes in this game.
Yeah, that's right. He made me do it.
Okay, calm down, Eddie. Any idea why he would do that?
I don't know. He came out of nowhere. Tried sneaking up on me in the dark. I heard footsteps, so I turned back and he was right there.
Man, like, look at him wobble back and forth, and the way he keeps changing the story to whatever's most convenient to diverging the blame.
The way he looked at me, I just had to do it.
He looked at you? I thought you said he came at you.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I could see it in his eyes.
His eyes.
He kept looking at
And
me.
we'll fast forward to my favorite moment here. Just a long stare. This is a great dramatic pause right here because it's a slow moment where he's thinking, how do I get out of this? Everything I've been saying so far isn't convincing him to leave me alone. Oh, it's just a joke. Yeah, let's just try that, and maybe that'll get me out of this.
You should see your face, James.
You should have seen your face, Eddie. I could see what you're thinking, and all you had to do was just some animation. That's the power of amazing animation.
I got you, didn't I?
Yeah, and whether he's telling the truth or not, it follows the pattern that Eddie has locked himself into based on his rotten experiences. I fucking love how this guy played Eddie, man. Fan-freaking-tastic. 11 out of 10 for Eddie. He's the one that I think is even better in this remake than he was in the original.
The only character I really didn't like nearly as much as the original was Maria. I don't know, I felt like she was a lot more playful and felt a lot more contrasting to James's comfort zones.
But I don't know, I find this interpretation of Maria feels like too calm and reserved. She's warm and comforting, while to me it felt like Maria's purpose was to be alluring, playful, lustful. I think she just feels too much like the person James should be looking for, and not enough like the, oh, am I the person you're looking for, if that makes sense?
And I mean, like, that is still a present aspect of her character. They do still play into that. In fact, there's even a whole new scene of her being all suggestive with James in a way that is clearly breaching his comfort zones.
What?
What is this? Is this...
But I don't know, man. In the original, I already felt that was getting across very well just in the way that she spoke and acted. She didn't need this whole extra long scene in the original because that was already getting across very effectively.
Clothes are different.
Her name is Maria. I don't look like a ghost, do I?
So this is a really good example of how I still think the original manages to say a lot more using a lot less sometimes. Not to knock the performance, she still does a really good job, and I do like a lot of the new pieces of Maria in this game, like the little interactions you can now have with her while you're walking around Silent Hill together.
Your wife, what was she like? Or is... Sorry, I'm not...
That's fine. Why do you ask?
Just curious.
I'm not sure I want to talk about it.
Oh, come on. You said we look alike? Please give me something.
Well, she liked to play the piano.
They even have that thing where she pulls out the old dress she was wearing out of a closet.
Hey, you think I'd look good in this one?
Sure.
James does not know how to react to anything at all. That's kind of funny. I do love seeing how, like, just stilted and awkward James is. Another thing I really do love seeing them explore more with James. So wrapping up my thoughts on the new Maria, it's not bad. It's not terrible. I don't hate it. But I do think the original direction and animation was a lot more thematically potent. And lastly, I guess, is Laura. Kind of hard to mess up Laura. You know, she's not exactly the most complex character. She's just a little kid. There's just not like a whole past to her or nothing yet, right? The voice acting's different. She does feel a little bit more like she doesn't like James. I think that's one thing I do like about the change in Laura. It really feels like she does not like James, more justifiably by the beginning. And the way James tries to figure out how to react to her in a way that's not going to just make her run away again, I did like that. It does feel like there's a little bit more of a progression of James trying to be a better person to her. So yeah, Laura, I think, is perfectly good. All the way there. I'd say 100% there with Laura. Yeah. Any more characters? Oh, how could I forget? This is the worst. This is the worst. Okay. I'm not trying to shit on a voice actor's performance. But, like, goddamn, the radio show when you're in the elevator in the hospital, it's like, hey, we got a radio show going on. If you know the answers to the questions, hey, who killed these kids in the hospital? It was Walter Sullivan. You know, there's something so unsettling about the nature of what he's talking about. And it just, everyone's cheering and laughing, and he's announcing it like this circus ringleader maniac just full of positive energy about suffering.
A brother and sister were playing in the road when they were attacked and chopped into pieces with an axe. Torn, smashed bones.
And that goes in with the themes of just the lack of empathy for the sake of just doing what we want. You know, all the notes you read in Brookhaven Hospital about the doctors trying to solve the illness. They don't care about helping the people. They just care about figuring out this thing. And then they start, like, abusing the patients and just, yeah. I think that stuff also got across really, really well in the notes and stuff here as well. But that radio show felt so perfectly thematically in tune with what this game was saying. And the new guy in the radio just... What kind of jigsaw bullshit is this?
Into pieces with an axe. Torn flesh. Smashed bones. Splattered blood. What a terrible tragedy. What a gruesome end to such innocent lives. One of the victims was a local boy named Billy Locane.
And I don't know, I think the reason it works so well in the original is because it felt like this valiant effort to trivialize suffering and turn it basically into entertainment, to turn suffering into pleasure. And this doesn't even try to do that, it just makes it like, the scary horror game evil voice man. What the fuck is this bullshit?
The time will soon come to collect your prizes. But be careful.
This just doesn't feel like it's even interested in what that original thing was. It just felt like there's kind of red lines and threw it in. I don't know. Did not like that radio thing. That, if anything, was just so blatantly just chopped out, lost, trampled on, destroyed. It was the radio guy on the radio. That's the one voice I hate. Sorry, whoever voiced that guy. Maybe they didn't tell you to do it like that, but I don't know. I don't know what happened there. But hey, in hindsight, I'm kind of happy that the only character I was genuinely upset about the change was the single most insignificant guy in the whole thing. I mean, he was probably not even real. That guy probably exists in James's brain, you know what I mean? So it's like, hey, if that's my biggest complaint about the voice acting, I'm pretty okay with that. The one last thing I'll say about the story is I'm not really a huge fan of how it feels like they stretch out a lot of scenes. So many scenes that did not take this long to get the point across. There's all these dramatic pauses, and, you know, sometimes it really does work. Again, with that scene with Eddie, it's fantastic. Oh, and I also like the initial encounter with Pyramid Head as well, the whole scene in the closet. That having a little bit more breathing room really added to the tenseness of the scene. But not all the time it really feels like it's adding anything. It just makes a lot of scenes feel a lot slower. I mean, for crying out loud, the scene where they just get the ring out of the fridge, look how long it takes in the original versus this new one.
You can't open it?
Yeah, Maria, give me a hand here.
Come on. You're supposed to be the big man around here. How's a little girl like me supposed to help?
Yeah. Give me a hand.
Me? You're supposed to be the big man around here. How's a
What's
little girl like me
this?
supposed to help?
Not very cute, is it? Here, James. You
Fine.
take it.
Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm gonna start talking over it a little bit now. So yeah, I'd appreciate how the mood of this scene was changed to stay more consistent with the rest of this new interpretation of James. He's played more awkwardly, which I like. But man, did every line need this much breathing room
Not very
between
cute,
it? I don't
is it?
know, it just kind of makes it drag on a little
Here,
bit.
why don't you take it?
Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, it's gonna be done in a second now, and boom! There we go, we've finally caught up. So you see what I mean, right? They didn't need to drag it all out this much.
So yeah, I guess that wraps up what I think about the story and the
new voice acting and all that stuff. Yeah, I guess boss fights are part of the spoiler section too, because that is definitely a spoiler. The boss fight with Eddie was so much fun. You know, the new way the fights have this sense of progression to the environments around you, like the first Pyramid Head boss fight. The longer it goes into the fight, like when you're closer to the end, it starts like raining halfway through, everything gets way more busted up as the fight goes on, and when you're closer to the end, you get this feeling like, okay, the fight's gotta be over soon, everything looks crazier now. Eddie's fight was very similar in a really neat way. It's still in the same meat freezer, but at a point the hooks start moving, and then suddenly the obstacles you're moving around and trying to look through him for is so much harder, because it's just, there's way more stuff to hide behind, way more stuff to consider, and another cool use of fog. This fight was so much fun, man. It felt way more like a classic ass shootout. It was kind of reminded me of Metal Gear Solid 3's Ocelot shootout a little bit. Really fun boss fight. It feels weird to be like, yeah, killing this character that I have a lot of emotions about are really fun to do, but I mean, it is still a video game that's meant to be fun to play, I guess, and they did that part really, really well. It was a cool fight, but yeah, when you beat Eddie, you do feel that a little more, and also, he doesn't do that silly line. I always thought that line was silly, where he's like, I killed a human being, he doesn't even say that at all, and I think the lack of that line almost benefits. Okay, you could see it either way, but I'll argue in favor of it just for the sake of optimism, because I'm sick of being so pessimistic about this game. It feels great to finally... feels like a cloud off my shoulders. Like, what? This thing isn't the worst thing ever? Oh my god. But arguing in favor of it, you can almost interpret it as like, by now James knows he has killed someone already. But again, that's only a change you would notice if you have played the original, so I don't know, maybe I'm just huffing farts out my butt.
But I don't know, the expression on his face right here looks like this feeling is familiar to him. And if you're playing on hard mode, like, the fights are challenging too, like, they're not easy. Pyramid Head, the first fight, I was very happy to see that you can once again defeat him without firing a single bullet. It doesn't matter how much you pump into him, you just gotta wait. You fight him in a totally different arena, way more room to this one. I guess I did that for the new camera and whatever, but the room you fought him in the original actually is still in the apartments. It's just like a random room you pass through now. The fight with the dangling bed guy in the hospital is more or less the same. You just fight one of them, though the fact that you can now look at the ceiling, that is also part of the fight, the way they come down and you gotta make sure they don't attack you. This was a pretty rough one for me. Like, I didn't even have enough ammo to beat it with just bullets by the time I got here, so I actually had to finish it off with the pipe, and I barely got through. It was such a cool feeling. There is one brand new boss that was not in the original. You actually fight one of those hanging guys that were completely underutilized in the original, and making a fight out of this, kind of a cool idea. I really didn't expect this at all, and it's a pretty damn fun fight too. I really love the boss battles. Like, again, you're leaning into just fun survival horror gameplay. Again, reminds me a lot of the boss fights from Evil Within. Just the amount of scrambling you're doing. You can only see so much with the third-person camera, so like, you gotta run and do some guesswork about where you think they are, like behind you. Meleeing is also now a totally viable option in the boss fights. You'll probably want to squeeze in a couple of those whenever you can to save some bullets. The hospital fight, I totally ran out of bullets, and I
I had to finish it off with a pipe. That was a cool moment. Oh man, the double Pyramid Head fight on hard mode was so brutal. I must have died like 10 times trying to beat this thing. It was so hard. You really have to relax and then time those dodges carefully, relying heavily on the sound cues as well whenever one of them goes off screen. It's like Ornstein and Smo all over again. Don't worry about the length this time though. I know in the original game this on hard mode is a notorious fight. It takes like 20 minutes to half an hour, no joke. Here it is brutally hard, but the good run, when you get it right, it's not going to take any more than like 5 to 6 minutes. The final boss sure as hell feels a whole lot more like a final boss. Mary now has 3 phases to the fight. The second phase even switches up the arena. It's very chaotic and oppressive. It's a really cool take on the last boss, actually. Though I did have a pretty miserable time with it at first. Like, for some reason, James would not pick up the items on the walls of the room. Like, I need those supplies. I'm out of bullets. I gotta pick those up. But he just wouldn't pick them up. I was mashing the button. I was dancing around. It felt like he would pick it up whenever he felt like it. As if, like, the hitbox wasn't big enough or something. And I even turned the button prompts back on, and yeah, those white circles, they were not really getting filled. It really made me mad. Like, it felt like I kept dying and it was not my fault at all. But luckily, this does seem to have been patched already. I double-checked it before putting this video up. And yeah, I did not have a problem at all with it this time. Weird. Oh, as for endings and stuff, every single ending from the original is in this game, including the dog and the UFO endings. Though again, I think replaying this whole thing to get those endings, I don't know if I'm gonna get them all this time because it's just like it takes so much longer to get through the game. But they are all still there. And there's 2 new ones. Now, one of which I really like and the other I kind of have mixed feelings on. Excuse me, sorry, coffee burps. So, one of the new endings just feels like another choice James can make, because that is the core of the original endings. Is James going to leave with Laura? Is he going to leave with Maria? Is he going to just drown himself? It depends. It's like, depending on the experience he had, what choices he made, like in his brain, look at the picture, look at the letter, you know, what are you thinking about? Look at the knife, what are you thinking about? I really thought that was a cool way of handling which ending is chosen. And they still handle that exactly the same. Which is very, very cool because it's such a non-traditional thing. It's such an archaic thing by today's standards. It makes it a little difficult to get an ending on purpose, which people hate. And I was worried they were going to be like, okay, knock off anything that general audiences may react badly to. This must be a market-tested product. I'm surprised how much they avoid that. That's another thing I was worried about. But anyway, one of the new endings just feels like another choice James could make, and it's basically him using the White Claudia, the psychedelic drug from Silent Hill 1 that Kaufman had Lisa on. He uses that to make himself buy the delusion that he did find Mary here. Well, I guess it is left a little open, you know, the way he disappears, the TV reflection. I think that's cool. The other one I'm a little mixed about. It's like, oh, Maria's in the car the whole time, and it's like the one where James drowns himself. It's that same thing, but it just basically confirms that Mary was in the backseat of his car dead. And it's like, okay, well, maybe it gives some more context to the grave that's dug up, because, like, oh, he dug her grave up. Wait. Oh, shit. Okay, the implication is that he didn't kill her and take her body. His implication that he dug her body up? No, wait, or is it, did she want to be buried in Silent Hill, because that was a special place, and that's why he has her body, and then that's when the delusion started? Is that what's happening? Okay, wait a minute. I think I just noticed something that made me like this a little more, actually. Okay. I have to do more thought on whether or not I like that new ending, but that's what I think of it so far, I guess. Yeah, I guess that wraps up my thoughts on the story. I'm rather satisfied with it. Just to summarize quickly how satisfied I am with each character, again, for the people that skipped. I'd say James, I'm like 80% on. Maria, I'm kind of 50% on. Eddie, Angela, Laura, 100% satisfied with those ones. Those ones were the best. And the rest, mostly satisfied, but like here and there with it. But yeah, overall, I'm pretty happy with what they did with the story. I think it's all there, and bits and pieces of it, I am shocked, actually feels slightly enhanced. Oh man, okay, so let's talk about the pandering stuff. Or, well, I guess what you could consider pandering. For other people, it's just stuff for the fans, but let's talk about it, and with a balanced perspective, I'm in the middle. That's the smartest place to be. Either side's dumb, I'm in the middle. The trolley question, just turn the lever halfway. I fixed it, I'm so smart. Fucking goddammit. Well, who am I even making fun of? Myself? I don't even know what I'm talking about.
This town is full of pizza.
Pandering stuff. Get to the point, James. The first 2 days this thing was out, it was just the people that like paid the 10 extra bucks for it. That deluxe edition let you play it 2 days early, and you got all the costumes, which, quick aside, I don't like that you have to pay for the goofy costumes because they always felt like a reward for getting through such a scary game, as your reward is being able to make the game a little more goofy, less scary. That was a really cool reward. It's tradition. So many horror games do it. Now it's behind, like, buying it, and I don't really like that. And during those first 2 days, everyone I saw that was talking about it, they were just talking about how awesome it was, that it was full of references to the original and the other Silent Hill games. I'm like, okay, that's cool. That's cool, but is there any real substance there? And then I wasn't seeing people talk about the gameplay or the story, it was just references, so that made me worried this was going to be a pandering mess. Now, there is stuff in here that I can see people viewing as pandering, but I changed the way I thought about it, and I'll get to that in a second. But basically, there's this thing called memories, which is when you walk up to a place it was like the original spot you did something. For example, the original place where you find the plank. You find the plank in a different spot, but if you go to that spot, you click on it, and you get a sound bite with the camera angle from the original game. It's sort of a neat little thing they threw in here. But after a while, I just kept getting these, and it's like, oh, remember how it was like this before? Remember how it was like this before? Remember how it used to be? And I saw somebody on Twitter put it into words that I think was just perfect. It was something like, Bloober has this weird habit of changing things completely, and then adding a reference back to it as if they just fabricated an Easter egg. And yeah, it kind of does feel like Jon Favreau, Lion King remake levels of like nostalgia extraction. It's like, oh, Rafiki doesn't have the stick, but he gets it at the end so we can remind you to do my concoction of brain chemicals. I totally see why people roll their eyes at it, is all I'm getting at. But then I changed the way I thought about it. I thought, you know, well, who's really playing? Who's really playing this game? The majority of people. Well, think about the original Silent Hill 2. Like, it was, I think the Silent Hill 2 was the best selling of the first 4. And it only sold, I think, about 1 million copies, which is pretty good, but it's certainly not like Metal Gear numbers. It's certainly not like big enough to really enter the main cultural hemisphere. This game will, because it's got the super graphics, it's got the AAA appeal. People that like The Last of Us, you know, that just kind of general audience crowd, those people are going to be getting into Silent Hill for the first time, and they're going to get a version that meets that AAA standard while being a little more archaic than they may be used to, which is a fantastic way to get more people into the series, in my opinion. Now, these people, the grand majority of people playing this, like maybe a good million of us, we all remember those angles. We remember those things. But maybe 4, 5, 6, 9 million people that never played the original, way more than people that have ever played Silent Hill before. It depends on how well this thing does. But those people are going to see those camera angles, and they're going to be like, oh, it's that. And then they're going to clue in that it's like, oh, this must be how like the first game was. And they're going to notice the cameras. Oh yeah, because they had those fixed cameras. That must be the angle from there. And then their gears, the brain cogs are going to be moving. And guess what happens? Curiosity. I mean, I know, many of us know what the deal with the pizza is, but all these new players, they're going to be wondering, they're going to be curious why the hell the game's trying to make them think about a pizza. I think this game almost ends up doing the pandering in a way that actually encourages the people that don't know what the fuck they're getting at. They want to play the original to see what they're getting at, because they just show the scene, show the angle, but they don't show what used to be there. So it's done in such a way, I think it's only going to encourage people to play the originals. Now, I wish that mattered, because if someone new who's just like, I got a PS5 and that's all I want, all I got, I'm a general audience man, you know what I'm talking about, like just the normie crowd, for lack of a better word, I don't know what else to call them. But, you know, those people probably aren't going to want to figure out how to download the original on an emulator. Like, a lot of people just, that's kind of a buffer of access to these people. They don't have the originals playable up on the store anymore, and that's something that's got to change. Because it's cool seeing the Easter eggs in a way that almost feels like, yeah, we're gonna get more people to play the original, but like it doesn't really matter if you can't play the original. So you gotta get that up. Now I am optimistic about this as well because they just did the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection, and that has a PS1 game in it. So I feel like they could probably get those same people to just do a master collection of Silent Hill 1 through 4. I really hope they do that, and I think they probably will. I feel like if you put all those in a bundle, I think there's going to be so many new people that would bounce off of this and want to check out the original, especially if they got 1 and 3 and even maybe 4 with it as well, right? So that's what's gotta happen.
I think game preservation is very important, and that's why it bums me out to see people wave away criticisms against remakes being replacements for originals. What do you call it? Like economically, culturally, whatever. Because it's only the only one available, like legally for purchase. And these people say like, oh, all these old fans of Silent Hill are so scared that their old copies are gonna vanish off the shelf. It's like, no. Why would I be scared of that? That's a cartoon thing. And I think if you have to make up a cartoon version of what these people are arguing, then you're not really arguing with anything or making an effort to really understand why they're saying those things to begin with. And like, I get people are always trying to be overtly positive about something, and it's a bummer to see how many people seem to have such negative feelings about something leading up to it. I understand that, and I was even part of a lot of that, airing my thoughts, and they were often quite negative about this remake, and sure, that might have felt like a downer, but I do think criticism is very important. I mean, Bloober was apparently very receptive to criticism, and this idea that it's like, okay, yeah, I don't know everything, let's see what these people think. Letting that nudge your vision here and there, I think, can be a valuable thing. I'm not saying that you should just do everything the fans want you to do, but listening helps, and I think it really did help this game shape together, because it did end up being way better than these old trailers really made it look like. So no, Buddy Bingo on Twitter, I'm not scared that I'm not going to be able to play the original again. I'm worried that, well, what about all the people in the future? You ever see that Kurtzgazart video that shows how many people there will be? We're a blip in time, and so is our entire history compared to every human that will live in the future. So why should those people only have access, only be able to play with ease the new version? What if some of those people, like myself, saw something in the original that isn't in the new one that really clicked with them, and then they found one of their favorite games? Why do you think people in the future should not be able to do that? I don't think everybody should just be expected to only like the newest version of something, so I think it is important to keep the older versions of it available as well. And again, the original versions of RE4 are also on every storefront you can buy the remake of that on. It is possible, you can do that. And I always see people try to argue that there's some logical reason why they can't re-release these games. Listen, dude, if freaking hobbyists can do it for free in their spare time for fun, then I don't see why a multi-million-dollar corporation can't figure that out. So until they get some sort of Silent Hill Master Collection up there for everybody to be able to easily play, I will unfortunately have to carry those feelings with me. And hopefully, again, you're watching this in the future or something, I don't know, and it's already up and it's already solved. But yeah, until then, I will carry that criticism with me, because I do think that is something important. So right now, I will say, as much as I do love this remake, I love it as something that complements the original, but that would just be so much better if people could still very easily play the original. As for the future of Bloober, and even more remakes maybe, well, I'm not necessarily interested in what else Bloober is going to do just because they did do a good job on this. I don't know. But if they did do more remakes, I think I probably would be, definitely a little biased here, but I would be totally open to that. Remaking Silent Hill 1 or 3 or even 4, like a polarizing remake of 4 that not everyone loves. I think that would be the most interesting thing they could do. But yeah, you're basically just making new games out of these settings and scenarios and characters that I love, and I'm totally open to that. In fact, I would probably be pretty excited for it this time. But before they do that, they really do need to get the originals up on new platforms and Steam and stuff. I hope that takes priority over doing more remakes. I mean, if DuckStation can give you widescreen Silent Hill, I don't see why Konami can't. So, it's a bit of a bittersweet feeling, but ultimately it's a sweeter sensation than I ever could have predicted. I'm really happy this game turned out this way. I had a freaking blast playing it, not just for, critic reasons of enjoying seeing the differences in a new thing based on something you love, but just as a good video game.
So it's also incredible to see something drag a whole bunch new people into the Silent Hill series for the first time. I mean, there's something every Silent Hill fan understands, is that you're opening that map every 2 seconds. And that was something I found very few people could relate to. And now it feels like that's something a whole lot of people understand. Those little nuanced, dumb little, like, game-ass things, they preserve that. Like, you still have to keep looking at the map. There ain't no mini-map. Oh, another change, man, I can still think of things I like about this. I like that you hold the map in real time, so if there's an enemy nearby you, you still hear the radio go and it's like, oh, I can't be looking at that right now. And I also like that you can click the flashlight on and off. It just feels like the map's really there in front of you. Nice little touch. But it's that sort of thing that really makes it feel like this remake not just understands the original story or its gameplay, but it understands it culturally as well. It knows which archaic things to keep and which things to modernize, even if some of the modernizations feel aimless and for the sake of it, like they're just kind of copying The Last of Us, but oh well. Am I 100% satisfied with it? Not really. Am I 90% satisfied with it? Not really. Am I 80%? Maybe not. Am I 75? Yeah. I'd say I'm 75% satisfied with this remake. I expect it to be 30%. So is that the rating I give it, a 7.5 out of 10? I've never given a game a score in like 10 years. What's the point of that? What's the point of saying something was good or bad when you could talk about it for an hour and a half, waste everybody's time? Thanks for listening to me. Hopefully I said something that was worth listening to. And I hope you'll play the remake. And if you're playing the remake for the first time, I hope you'll find a way to play the original as well. PS2 stuff's pretty easy to emulate these days. Just saying, grab an ISO from your uncle legally and check that out if you really do love the remake. I just want to encourage people to try and play the originals too, because they're different things. And if you loved one, it could just be a gateway drug into the rest of the series. Play all the first 4. And yeah, if you find the controls archaic and difficult to engage with, especially the first one, because you have to use the tank controls in the first one, just really stay with it and try really hard to let your muscle memory adjust. And eventually you'll get the hang of it and you'll be able to get through it. And it'll be challenging in a new, different way too. It's like if you enjoyed just roughing through Silent Hill 2 Remake and you feel like you barely survived and it's like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Well, think about it that way. You're going to be barely getting through, but it's going to be because like you're wrestling with a new type of input you've never really had to respond to before. And I don't know, just try to think about it that way, right? And you will have a whole lot of fun with those original controls that everyone says is like clunky and stuff. But to me, they're not clunky. They're archaic. They're just a little less traditional by today's standards, but it is still like a gameplay setup that's just different and fun to play. I don't think that gameplay is like a wedge between you and the experience. It is the experience. At least it's a big part of it, and that's, you know, what it is to me. This new remake is amazing in its own right, but it is a brand new experience. It can't replace that original experience. So if you like the old one, I say play the new one, and if you like the new one, I say play the old one. Play both. Thanks for listening to my big ass long ramble. Hope I made it feel extra special because it's Silent Hill, which is extra special. I'm hopefully going to be making a brand new video about the original Silent Hill 2, hopefully by the end of November. Definitely not gonna have that out in time for Halloween, but I got this one out in time for Halloween, so that's something at least. But yeah, look forward to me making a whole brand new video about Silent Hill 2 original. Kind of happy I waited for the remake to come out because I can have a little bit comparing and contrasting and summarizing my thoughts in a way I didn't really do very effectively with this video, which is why it's this long. But hope you look forward to that. Thank you so much for watching, and yeah, I hope you all get into the Silent Hill games.
Where's my wife? Where's my wife? Where is my wife? Where's my wife? Where's my wife? Where's my wife? Where did my wife go? Where's my wife? I want my life back. Where's my wife? I can't find my wife. Is she in the scary town? Oh no!